Today we uncover the uncomfortable truth about one of Britain's most trusted retailers. Because this is not just a shop that sells food, clothes and homeware. For years it sold something far more valuable than that. It sold reassurance. Walk into one of its stores and everything is designed to tell you the same story. The lighting feels calmer. The packaging looks cleaner. The prices sit higher. The whole experience whispers the same message into your ear. Relax. Someone serious is in control here. Someone has checked things properly. Someone has done the worrying for you. But here is the question more shoppers should be asking now. What happens when a retailer built on trust starts showing the very cracks people thought they were paying extra to avoid? Because that is where this story becomes far more serious than a normal bad headline. In April 2025, the company disclosed a cyber attack. Customer data was taken. Online services were disrupted. Orders were paused. Parts of the operation reportedly had to fall back on pen and paper just to keep goods moving. Think about how damaging that is for a business that built its name on control, smoothness, and quiet reliability. The polished surface suddenly stopped looking like proof of higher standards and started looking more like a cover for weaknesses customers were never supposed to notice. And the deeper you look, the harder that premium promise becomes to defend. Supplier concerns broke into public view. Questions over judgment started landing harder. Convenience that loyal customers had paid for began disappearing. The whole relationship started to feel thinner, shakier, and more one-sided than the atmosphere in the stores had ever suggested. That is what makes this matter. People do not shop there the way they shop at an ordinary chain. They lower their guard. They inspect less. They assume more. And that becomes dangerous the moment the brand no longer deserves automatic trust. So in this video, we are going to break down exactly why so many shoppers should stop treating this retailer like a safe bet by default. We are going to look at the failures, the fallout, the judgment calls, and the bigger pattern behind them. But before we get into it, I need you to hit that hype button right now, because videos like this only matter if people actually see them. Every like, every share, and every time you push this into the feed helps more shoppers question the automatic trust these premium brands still rely on. It helps force attention onto problems companies would rather smooth over with image, memory, and old reputation. So, let's get into it. The premium promise. The most valuable thing this retailer ever sold was never just food, clothing, or convenience. It is reassurance. That is what people are really paying extra for. They are paying for the feeling that someone somewhere behind the shelves, behind the website, and behind the delivery van is keeping a tighter grip on the whole operation than the average chain ever would. That is why premium brands are judged differently. People behave differently inside them. They inspect less. They compare less aggressively. They forgive more. They assume more has already been checked before the product reached them. Even when shoppers would never admit it out loud, that confidence is there in the background. If a place looks more refined, it must be more controlled. If it sounds calmer, it must be more careful. If it costs more, it must be doing something better than everyone else. That belief saves the retailer a huge amount of work. Once customers start doing part of the trusting automatically, the brand no longer has to prove as much every single time. It can lean on memory, mood, and the old idea of what it stands for. That is what makes a premium chain so vulnerable when things begin to slip. A discount store can disappoint people and still be seen as ordinary. A premium store disappoints people and the reaction goes deeper because customers thought they were buying distance from the usual mess. That is the backbone of this whole video. The danger is that premium branding teaches shoppers to lower their guard around a business that may no longer deserve automatic trust. Once that happens, each failure carries more weight because it is happening inside a relationship built on calm confidence. And once you see that clearly, the first major blow looks much bigger than it did at the time. Because it was not just a technology story. It was the moment the name itself stopped feeling as protected as people thought it was. When the machinery underneath fails, the polished surface stops looking like proof and starts looking like cover. The breach that changed everything. The event that changed the tone of this story was digital, disruptive, and easy for some people to dismiss at first as just another corporate headache. In April 2025, Marks & Spencer disclosed a cyber attack. Later, Marks & Spencer confirmed that some customer personal data had been taken, including names, contact details, dates of birth, and online order history. That matters more than a lot of companies like to admit. People give that information away because they assume the basics are covered. They assume that a retailer asking for their details knows how to protect them. And when the retailer is Marks & Spencer, that assumption becomes even stronger. The shopper may not say it, but the feeling is there. My details should be safer here than they would be somewhere rougher or cheaper. That is why the breach cuts so deep. The problem was not only that criminals got into the system. The problem was that a premium retailer that sells calm control suddenly had to tell customers their personal information had been taken, while large parts of the business were already visibly struggling. That turns a technical incident into a trust incident in a matter of hours. Then the operational fallout made it far worse. Online orders for clothing and home were paused for weeks. Services were disrupted. The company ended up relying on pen and paper in parts of the business just to keep goods moving. That detail alone is enough to change how people picture the whole operation. A chain that had spent years looking smooth and dependable suddenly sounded exposed, improvised, and much less buttoned up than the atmosphere in the stores had always suggested. That is when the old premium story started to break. Because if you had asked a lot of shoppers before that attack what exactly they believed they were paying extra for, many of them would have said the same thing. Better systems, better management, more control behind the scenes, fewer ugly surprises, less public chaos. Then one cyber attack came along. Customer data was taken, services froze, and core processes had to be handled the hard way. The financial hit made the whole thing even harder to dismiss. This was serious enough to cost the company hundreds of millions of pounds. It was a business-wide stress test, and the result did not look premium at all. Timing made it even more damaging. The business had been talking about recovery, progress, and momentum. Then the attack arrived and forced everyone to look at a harder question. If the operation was as strong as it seemed, why did one breach appear able to shake so many parts of the customer experience at once? And once that doubt gets into a shopper's mind, the next part hits even harder because now the damage is no longer sitting in the background. It starts showing up in the ordinary rhythm of buying things. The real cost becomes clearer when it leaves the headline and starts interfering with everyday life. When customers felt it for themselves. A lot of trust in modern retail lives in tiny routines. You place an order, you expect it to arrive, you tap your card, you collect a parcel. You assume the chain between your click and your purchase is solid enough that you do not need to think about it. When retail works, it disappears into habit. Then something breaks and suddenly the habit is gone. That is what happened after the attack. Online clothing and home orders disappeared for weeks. Services came back gradually, not all at once. Some features returned earlier than others. Some parts of the process took much longer to settle. For customers, this was not just an embarrassing corporate story they read about once and forgot. It showed up as uncertainty, delay, and the uncomfortable feeling that the premium relationship they thought they had bought into was more fragile than it looked. That matters because a premium retailer does not simply promise nicer products. It quietly promises a smoother life around those products. So when the digital side suddenly looked brittle and slow to recover, the damage was not confined to orders alone. It made the whole brand feel less dependable. And it was not only the website. Stock availability was affected in stores as well. Food, clothing, and home all felt the aftershock because systems had been taken offline. So even people who never opened the application or tried to order a jumper could still feel the disruption walking through a branch. Missing products, uneven availability, uncertainty around services, and the general sense that a business built on control was improvising in public. That is a much bigger reputational wound than a pure online problem. This is the practical side of the trust trap. The real damage usually arrives more slowly. It shows up in broken routines, uncertain timelines, missing stock, and the discovery that the premium retailer you trusted is not shielding you from disorder anymore. A bargain chain can sometimes get away with that because nobody expected it to be above mess in the first place. Marks & Spencer never had that excuse. And once shoppers start feeling instability in the basket, the parcel, and the weekly routine, the premium calculation changes. You stop asking whether the company had one bad incident. You start asking what your extra spend is actually buying now. Because if the systems can look this vulnerable and the experience can unravel this visibly, then the old assumption that the business is automatically better managed starts looking less like wisdom and more like habit. That is where the next crack matters. Because after systems and service come under pressure, people start noticing something even more dangerous. They begin to wonder whether the judgment behind the brand still deserves the same easy confidence it once got for free. Once the strong hand on the wheel stops feeling automatic, smaller signs of poor judgment start to matter more. The judgment problem. This is where some people are tempted to wave away the rest of the story as smaller stuff. That would be a mistake. Once a customer's basic confidence has already been shaken, softer signs of poor judgment carry more weight than they used to. A retailer like this does not only sell goods, it sells taste, restraint, and the belief that somebody inside the machine still knows where the line is. That is why the advertising ruling from 2025 matters, even if it was not the biggest scandal in Britain. The Advertising Standards Authority ruled against one advert because the model in the image appeared unhealthily thin. On its own, that is not a company-ending event, but in the context of everything else, it matters because it reinforces the same deeper point. The people behind the brand do not look as automatically sound in their judgment as the premium image suggests. First, the systems looked exposed. Then the customer experience looked fragile. Then even the image-making side of the business got publicly questioned. None of those incidents are identical, but they chip away at the same old reflex in the customer's mind. This place is probably being run with more care than most other places. That is what shoppers think they are buying when they choose a premium name over somewhere cheaper. Not just better food or smarter clothing, but a steadier set of decisions all round. Once that broad confidence starts weakening, everything else has to work much harder to justify the higher price and the calmer atmosphere. And that matters even more when the questions move away from presentation and into the parts of the business where premium language can soften the truth but never fully solve it. The neat wording on the shelf can only do so much once the questions reach the chain behind the store. What the premium image could not guarantee. This is where the story stops being about atmosphere and starts being about the hard limits of branding. A nicer environment can soften almost anything. So can elegant copy, careful labels, and a tone that sounds responsible and measured. But none of that changes the fact that a large modern retailer still depends on supply chains full of farms, growers, factories, contractors, and labour pressure that no shopper can personally verify by standing under bright lights with a basket in hand. One of the most damaging mistakes people make with premium retailers is assuming that a more expensive store has somehow removed the ethical risk from the edges of the business. It has not. It may reduce some risks in some areas. it may set better standards in some categories, but it does not make the ugly parts vanish just because the shelf tags are nicer and the tone is calmer. That illusion became much harder to hold when one supplier issue broke into public view. In 2024, the company suspended an egg farm supplier after undercover footage linked to poor conditions. Stories like that cut straight through one of the strongest assumptions premium shoppers make. If I pay more here, surely the edges are being watched more carefully. Surely this is exactly the sort of thing a business like this is supposed to catch before investigators force it into the open. That is why supplier stories hit harder in a premium setting. The public is not only reacting to the footage, it is reacting to the gap between what the store implies and what the investigation reveals. A polished food hall suggests order, care, and tighter control. Then a story like that arrives and reminds everyone that modern retail is still modern retail. Complex, pressured, and full of weak points that branding alone cannot protect. The Labour side tells a similar story. The company has acknowledged systemic human rights challenges in parts of its produce supply chain and talked about the need for stronger monitoring, supplier standards, and wider ethical trade work. That matters because it shows the risk is not imaginary, not ancient history, and not fully solved by the existence of a premium logo. This is the uncomfortable lesson at the center of the whole video. The issue is not that one company is uniquely bad while everyone else is spotless. The issue is that premium branding can tempt customers to stop checking at exactly the point where checking still matters most. Once you understand that, the whole shopping experience changes. You stop reading careful wording as proof. You stop treating a higher price as a substitute for scrutiny. And once that moral reassurance starts weakening, customers become much less patient with smaller service changes too, because the relationship begins to feel as if it still expects premium loyalty while quietly giving less back in return. When the glow around the brand fades even a little, routine changes stop feeling minor and start feeling like part of a larger downgrade. The relationship started feeling one-sided. Trust does not survive on headlines alone. It survives in habits, in little conveniences, in the parts of a retail relationship that make people stay even when the prices are higher than somewhere else. A smooth order, a reliable delivery perk, a branch that still fits your routine. Those details matter because they help justify the emotional premium. That is why the next set of changes landed the way they did. In April 2026, the Sparks Delivery Pass was dropped. New customers could no longer sign up, and existing customers could not renew once their current period ended. On paper, that may look small compared with a cyber attack. In context, it feels more significant. The digital side of the business had already lost goodwill through disruption and uncertainty. So when a paid convenience quietly disappeared, it did not land as a tiny housekeeping tweak. It landed like another sign that the customer was still expected to buy into the premium relationship while the benefits of that relationship were getting thinner. Then there is the physical side of the business. The company has been reshaping its estate, closing some older full-line sites while investing more heavily in food-led locations, extensions, and renewed stores. From a boardroom point of view, that is modernization. From the customer's point of view, it can feel different. It can feel like the version of Marks & Spencer they trusted is being redesigned around a new logic while still trading on the same old emotional reputation. Some people will welcome those changes. Some will not care. But the wider point still matters. A lot of loyalty is emotional. People are often loyal to the retailer they remember, not necessarily the one standing in front of them now. The name carries memory, and memory keeps doing more work than the current reality deserves. That is what makes this part of the story more important than it seems. The issue is not just whether a delivery perk disappeared or whether a store format changed. The issue is that the company is asking customers to keep bringing the same old trust while the terms of the relationship keep shifting under their feet. Once systems have already failed, service has already stumbled, and ethical reassurance already looks less automatic, that old shortcut becomes dangerous. A shopper can end up buying on memory instead of reality. And by the time even the atmosphere around the stores starts feeling more exposed, the old idea of a calm premium bubble becomes even harder to keep alive. When even the wider environment grows harsher, the old promise of a protected premium world starts to look much thinner. The bubble around the store was breaking. 2. One of the quieter promises behind a retailer like this is that the store itself feels more ordered than the outside world, more controlled, more insulated from the roughness of modern high street life. That emotional premium matters. Customers do not just want quality products. They want a calmer experience around those products. That is why it mattered when senior figures began warning that retail crime had become more brazen, more aggressive, and more organized. This was not a problem created by one company alone, of course, but it still changes how the premium story feels. A business that once seemed to offer a cleaner, steadier escape from the disorder outside was now talking publicly about abuse, theft, and staff safety fears. That matters because it strips away yet another layer of the old illusion. The fantasy says a premium store is somehow insulated, better protected from the uglier side of the high street, more capable of preserving a calm experience for customers and staff. Then the company itself starts warning that the environment around the store is becoming more volatile, and the premium bubble weakens again. At that point, the smart customer has to step back and admit something simple. The old premium shield is not holding like it used to, not digitally, not operationally, not morally, not even atmospherically. This is where the whole thing comes together, because the warning is not about panic. It is about refusing to shop on inherited trust. Why you should pause before going back. The real reason to pause before shopping there again is not that the company is beyond repair. It is that too many customers still treat it as an automatic safe bet, even after too many visible cracks have shown up at the same time. A cyber attack exposed customer data and froze major services. Online ordering vanished for weeks. Stock availability was affected. Manual workarounds replaced systems people assumed were stronger than average. Public judgment looked shakier. Supplier concerns cut through the premium image. Human rights risks in parts of the chain were acknowledged as ongoing. A loyalty perk disappeared. The store estate kept shifting. The wider environment around retail looked harsher than the old premium story ever suggested. None of that proves every shelf is bad, but it proves something else very clearly. The old trust shortcut is no longer safe. That is the correction this video is trying to make. Do not walk in assuming the worrying has already been done for you. Do not assume the extra money is still buying stronger control, stronger oversight, or a calmer relationship, simply because that used to feel true. Read more carefully. Compare more carefully. Notice whether the convenience you once relied on still exists before building your routine around it again. Look at the store as it is now, not as a memory from when the brand felt untouchable. Because the expensive mistake is not just overpaying. The expensive mistake is overtrusting. Premium branding is brilliant at making caution feel unnecessary. It makes scrutiny feel excessive. It makes shoppers feel rude for checking closely, because the whole environment has already whispered that somebody else has done that work on their behalf. Maybe some things there are still worth the money. Maybe some parts of the business still deserve the trust built over years. But that should be the conclusion you reach after looking, not the assumption you carry in before you do. Until shoppers make that mental shift, the retailer will keep benefiting from a level of inherited confidence that recent events have shaken too badly for autopilot loyalty to make sense anymore. If this changed the way you look at Marks & Spencer, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments whether you think premium retailers still deserve the automatic trust they built years ago. Because the more people speak up, the harder it becomes for polished branding, old reputation, and quiet failures to keep passing unnoticed.